Hi, my name is Benedict. This is the walkthrough video for ADs-8, which is an analog drum synth module with obviously 8 channels. We'll start by giving you a sense of how it sounds, assuming you haven't watched the preset video. Gets aggravating after a while. There's a little bit of reverb on here, simply because things without reverb can get a little hard on the old hearing, especially in cans. It's pretty mild. Matter of fact, let's make it a little bit more mild. There we go, that will do. So we can fold that up. Now let's start looking at this. We have, as I said, 8 channels. Each of these is a fully fledged drum synth in its own right. I've made drum synths before. There are free ones out there if you want to see some of my thinking. They're not as good as this. This is really the best thing that I've done in drum synthesis. A couple of the modules are a little different in that they are weighted slightly to be a bit better at making whatever their namesake is. The hi-hats do not affect each other. If that's a must-have, that your shorts have to cut off your longs and your longs your shorts and stuff like that, some exclusive channels, then sample this off. It's a natural feel. Not all drum machines did that. The rest of them are the same as each other and made to be as broad as possible. So you will need to take some time to learn where things are. But the preset patterns that are in here are designed to give you a pretty broad range of what you're likely to get out of it. From the bottom, let's stop that. From the bottom, we've got pan and volume. The ability to trigger when something's playing, and you can see when it's being triggered by MIDI. So but oddly enough, it doesn't work in Reason from players. If you're triggering from MIDI notes, you'll see these little things flick up top. But if it's coming from a player, it doesn't. Go figure. Just one of those unique things about a DAW. So they may or may not trigger, especially if you put something between your MIDI and this device. So don't get upset. It's not changing the sound. It's merely not showing you. I put them on there to try and make it easier to know what's playing and when, because if you've got a complex pattern like this, it is a bit hard to know what's triggering, but it makes it a little easier to find them. But if you want to trigger a sound from your keyboard or pads, it'll all work fine, and you'll probably find the lights will flick. So we'll start with the one that everyone wants to start with, the kick drum. Now we've got 2 parts to this. This is synth A and this is synth B. You have options as to what they do. So for the moment we're only listening to synth A. Actually no, we're wearing a little bit of synth B, which is that, and synth A, which is this. So we can set our core pitch, and we can go pretty darn low. We can leave it as a solid state, holding pitch. We'll leave that as long as. So it makes it really easy to hear what's going on. So you can do the whole. It is velocity sensitive too. You can do some of the old 808 bass type of thing. Not that I've set it up specifically to do that, but that is part of what an analog machine will do, so it will do it. You can then set a depth, which is a pitch depth. You can set the speed with which that works. And yes, you can make it work apparently backwards. Generally, you're going to want a pretty fast attack and a reasonably fast decay. Once that's too long, we lose some of the sand. Now, depending upon how high that goes, we can put a huge amount of click on the front, which we may choose to get rid of here. Depth, lots of click. These envelopes are very fast, so we can reduce our click and therefore emphasize our thump. So it's all in the balance. When you're getting into trying to do the 909 type thing, then it is built a lot around that, of being fairly slow attack to give you more of that whoomp down on the bottom end. So it's all just a balance of where is my initial pitch, low, setting how fast your pitch attacks and decays. For kick drums, you're always going to want it to be pretty instant. And then your audio attack and decay. And it's all in how you balance those. The second half is using the second synth. Now we've got a really nice little sound there, quite usable already. The second half gives you the ability to give that sound an extra character, preferably one that's going to pull it through the mix or make it quite unique. So this synth can be a tone or noise. We'll work with tone for now. We can say, where do I want an accent to be on this? Let's go really sharp there, really sharp. Well, it's not doing anything there, so we're really fast there. So just getting that little tick, tick, tick. That can get lost. That's going to pull through the mix like nothing on earth. Yeah, you may want it louder. That's why God invented compression. But that's a pretty lovely sound. I bet we could find records out there with a sound that's a lot like that. May have been processed, but it's fundamentally a lot like that. So we've got ourselves a kick sound. Snares. Again, two halves. In this case, we've got white noise. Depending upon how you want to build your snare, is going to be whether you're going to want to build from the snare part of it, the noise part, back to the tone, or whether it's predominantly a tone with a little bit of noise. I do both, depending upon what that snare has to sound or feel like, the story it needs to tell. In white noise mode, this becomes a filter with an resonance. And yes, it will do that. I'm showing you that deliberately, not hiding from it. It's not a bug, but it's a bandpass filter. If you give it a pretty high amount of resonance, and particularly a pretty high, it will tend to do that. Not a bug, simply the laws of physics. Use it as a feature. Just understand it will be loud. This is why you should always work with a limiter across yourself. So we can find the kind of noise tone we want. Okay. Let's say we like that. No reason we wouldn't. We can choose these, but within the noise mode, they don't do anything. I don't have the facility to grey them out. You just learn they don't do anything. So now let's have a listen to this side. Not a nice balance there. Needs to be a lot shorter. I'd like it to be a little bit brighter. Okay, that'll do. Hi-hat. We've got a closed and an open. Now you can program however you like. You don't have to stick with these channel names at all. You can program all 8 of these to be some kind of bongo-y hand drum. You'll see there are kits in there that do that. But they just give you a sense to start with, okay, this is probably where you're going with this. Now, we're using a really high whistle here to give us a little bit of tonality in that, because metalwork, it does develop a tone as it resonates. And just your classic white noise stuff, excuse me. Let's go with a fairly dark set. We obviously don't want to overdo that. Okay, let's balance ourselves up. Just white noise. Little bit of that tone, so it gives it a character that you would not get out of noise. Now we probably want these to match. Now the reality is they're never going to match, and that is one of the charms of analog drum machines. They never match. You want them to be kind of the same, but they're not going to be. So use your eyes and use your ears to make them so that they feel like they're doing the same thing. Both of these we're going to want to have longer. And you can bring out some of the character of those by doing things like changing. See, I've changed the tone, the pitch depth, and the attack, and it makes that open sound seem more open. So we've got a slightly different set of physics, which is based on how those things would behave. So we end up with more natural, more charming sounds as a result of doing that. Big ass tom. So we're giving ourselves a big belly. I think we're going to want to go a little higher on this because of this kick drum. Sometimes your toms, especially your floor tom, can be below your kick. So you use that for those times where you really want to whoop. But depends on what you're doing. Again, we can choose our pitch. Let's say I don't want a lot of depth on that. Cool, I quite like that. Noise element. Nice. Something to be aware of with sort of Simmons style tom is, look at this. The tone attack is fairly slow. The noise attack is fast. So the noise actually comes before the tone. Quite the opposite of a snare. A classic snare is you hear the head and then the actual snares, the springs underneath, start going. So it's tap, wow. Whereas with a Simmons style tom, or possibly even snare, you're actually hearing noise first and then the tone coming out of that. Very distinctive thing. Send me an angel. Beautiful. I'm not going to mess with that too much. Now we can use 2 tones at once. Let's set both of them to fast, set both of them to the same just for the moment. Poppy. We can do the classic zap sound, much beloved by Kraftwerk and just about every industrial act that followed. I used them all the time. For years I actually didn't use hi-hats. I just used little zappy sounds. Didn't even think on it too much until I was in a store playing some of my music to somebody and the guy said, "Do you know you never use hi-hats? You always use those strange zap sounds." And it's like, it's not a failing, it was just a characteristic. So you can get pretty broad with zappity stuff, which can end up outside the realms of hearing. I actually quite like that. Let's shorten it up. No. There we go. Very subtle moves will give you quite a big difference in percussive sounds. What do we want to match that with? Not that, I don't think. They just don't stay together. Always think in terms of where your layers are. How do they go together? They don't. Hello, that's nice. Really nice sound. Little wood block. What have we got? What's he built from? A little poppy power sound. Good pitching, short, reasonably long decay. So reasonably short decay will give us a pop. This gives us more of that feel. We're getting rid of the... We can make it seem... We don't want to feel that pitch drop, but by having it fairly long, it's kind of not there, but it's quite different feel from if we simply just found that pitch here, because there's still that little tiny bit of movement, which is consistent with what's going to happen when you do this, because it's going to attack sharp, because you just hit it with something. You have to hit it a bit hard to make it sound loud enough to hear, and it'll start vibrating quite fast and then it will slow down, and that will be not only volume but its pitch as well. The more you can understand the physics of how a sound's going to get created, the more you can make it, or more importantly, the illusion of it. Because does that sound like a wood block? Get me a wood block, compare the two? No, not at all. But it will make people feel that if you play that right. You know, play a bell pattern, instant. What have we got on the other side? Kind of like a pair of cowbells. Not really cowbells, not perfect cowbells. Perfect cowbells are built from one of two possibilities, generally speaking. You get there however you get there. One of those possibilities is not enacted here, but you can fly it in. That possibility that's not enacted here is a ring mod. So you can take a single tone, put it into a ring modulator, and you create your second tone with the ring modulation, and you'll get a cowbell. You can get a quite metallic sounding cowbell that way. Cool. You can get a more woody sounding cowbell, which can go into metallic territory, by taking two pitches and having them offset from each other. That gives us a cowbell right away. Decay there may be a little too long. It's all going to depend on how those are going to behave next to each other. Your offset. See? Big old cowbell. Pan, pretty self-evident. Everything is summed. There are no multiple outs. Early drum machines did not have multiple outs. If you really feel the need that this need to be multiple outed, then either use 8 of them or however many multiple outs you feel the need for, or get your sounds and sample them. There is a lot of charm when you listen to a record with a real CR78 on it, or a KR55, whatever, mini pops. They weren't separated. It's the how it comes together. It's how they're processed together. So that combination of whether they've got reverb, how you've applied your compression, because compression has a huge impact on how drums behave, how you may have mixed your separate parts, that's going to give you that feel. So personally, I'm a massive fan of doing a lot of my drums inside the one device and then handling them together, because the synergy is in how they sound together. Now that, despite having some dubious rhythms technically, has actually given us quite a Latin sort of a feel. We say Latin loosely. There we go, let's try this. You don't need to see me dance. The thing there is that by having this processed inside the one kit, we can really have a good idea of what's happening here. Not that one, I always go to the wrong place. We've really changed the feel, and a lot of that feel comes from how they interact together. So while you may mix however you see fit, if you're looking for that really groovy feel of a drum box, then I will very strongly recommend that you don't break them out. It's how they go together. So we've got a really cool feel there and a pretty darn nice rhythm. If we had a main drum kit around that, doing a boof, 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 and the kind of thing, and you put that inside it, you're going to have a super cool tropical or funky house kind of feel. Don't stab me if I got the genre wrong. It doesn't matter. It's not the point. You hear it, you work with it. So we can then change the feel. Even though I've pulled the kick back at that point, if we've got a main kick drum working, then this one's a marker more than a whoomp welly creator. Times you might even pull it out. Now how it changes the rhythm, it changes how the compressor behaves. That becomes really nice. Sounds a little odd when we put a mid boost in there, but again, if we're running main drums, doing the 4 on the floor and the what have you, and then we put this inside, it's going to cut through the mix, but in a really nice way. If we weren't, then we might scoop it out. Flat. Cool, but flat. Added extra funkiness, and a lot of that funkiness comes not from the individual sounds, but from the way they interact together and the way they then force the compressor to interact. We've got some reverb on the front end. What if we, on the back end, what if we put it on the front? Quite a nice space around that, bearing in mind I'm in cans. Hear how that changes its feel now. It's not as wet and groovy as when we have the reverb actually being compressed into the thing. Now notice I'm only got a couple of dB of action here. That's all you need to make grooviness. If we go too hard, which is kind of mashing our work. You can, if it's your thing, you can fold back in dry mix as well, and you may feel that that's a good thing. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. I appreciate that it's a powerful technique, so I'm not saying don't do it, but we're not getting the same really groovy, wet funkiness that we are out of being a lot kinder to our material. So my advice here is a couple of dB is probably going to be doing you more of a favour. Try different types of compression. Have a filter controlling what it hears. Or go off to a different type of compressor. I'm not a fan of owning trillions of compressors, but there are some that are different enough to justify it. Anybody who follows me will see that I commonly open this guy. Apart from the fact that it makes everything far too loud out of the box, it has a really great character. Some, but not all of the time. Like, I'm not feeling it here, to be honest. We're getting there now. We've largely made it louder, but let's fix that little dilemma. We've largely taken what was there and just sort of leveled it a bit. It's nice, and they would use that in a mix. But I think it sounds, in this case, nicer with our reverb after. That's sort of... we have put a little hitch into our step with this, but in this case it works nicer with a reverb after. I've often found that this guy doesn't always respond well with a reverby signal going in. You just find that with different devices, whereas the C1L1 Molot device is It's really nice with very intricate material, but it's also really nice with stuff that's got reverbs and what have you on it. It's a couple of dB. It's a beaut device in what it does. So not really here to talk about that, but just to say to you, if you're thinking, oh no, this is no good because it doesn't have multiple ads, the lack of multiple ads was deliberate, because not only did it create a lot more drama in how this was built, and there's an awful lot of spaghetti in here as it is, but as I say, quite honestly, I didn't feel like it was the right way to go, bearing in mind that the greatest use of a classic drum module, whether that's a CR78 type beatbox, 808 type thing, or an old organ box, the things that sat underneath and did kooky sounding rumbas. A lot of their charm is in them together, but there is absolutely nothing to stop you from going, yep, that's the sound I want, sampling it off and going for it in Kong or whatever your weapon of choice is. Now, of course, if you have any questions, ask them down below. Have fun. It's the whole idea of this.